Thank you very much, everybody. It's great to be in Milwaukee. We love Milwaukee.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Both presidential candidates making what could be their final remarks to Wisconsin voters ahead of Election Day. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump both held rallies this evening in the Milwaukee area. Vice President Harris making several other stops in the state today, including one in the Fox Valley. Brittany Schmidt joined Harris's motorcade today. She joins us now in the studio with her remarks and Your Voice, Your Vote coverage. Brittany.
Bill, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris made 3 stops in Wisconsin today. Before heading to Milwaukee to round out the evening, she made a stop in Little Chute for a quick Get Out the Vote event. Moments after Madam Vice President Kamala Harris made her way off the plane at Ostrostrobel International Airport, it was a quick wave and then off to a rally at Little Chute High School, where a loud crowd of supporters waited to hear one of her last messages to Wisconsinites before the election on Tuesday. It's the reason Terry Grasser traveled from Plover.
It's a historical moment. You know, we've never had a woman running for president who was looking like she's going to have a chance to lead us.
Andrew Siebers of Appleton in the crowd, too.
Wanted to be part of the history.
For Rebecca Stevens of Stevens Point, it's the issues that brought her to the rally.
I have been watching the work that she did over the last year on reproductive rights before she took over as the head of the ticket. Really impressed by her work on that. So when she became the candidate for president, I was fully supportive.
Kamala Harris made a pledge to Wisconsin voters Friday night. She says she will stop price gouging in grocery stores, make sure Americans have a place to call home, and cover home care under Medicare.
So you don't have to worry about either spending down whatever savings you have to qualify for Medicaid or quitting your job and cutting off a source of income.
This event was a Get Out the Vote event. Harris was surprised by the number of people in the crowd who have already early voted in the state.
Who here has already voted?
So far, more than 1 million Wisconsinites have voted absentee. Harris wrapped up this 2,000-person event to jet off to a 12,000-person event in Milwaukee for one final event and concert.
We need everyone in Wisconsin to vote. You are going to make the difference in this election. You will make.
This was Harris's 9th stop in the state since becoming the presidential candidate. She will spend her remaining campaign days in other battleground states, heading to Atlanta and Charlotte tomorrow on this final weekend before Election Day. Bill?
Brittany, thank you. Former President Trump made remarks at Fiserv Forum tonight. That's less than 7 miles away from where Vice President Harris finished her campaign on Friday. In continuing Your Voice, Your Vote coverage, Drew Best brings us the details of the former president's speech. Drew.
Bill, former President Trump walked out onto the Fiserv floor just before 9:15 to cheers and chants, following remarks from people who endorsed Trump, including politician Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Trump making claims that if he had continued his time in office over the past 4 years, the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East would have never happened. The former president chastising President Joe Biden for his decisions, saying Vice President Kamala Harris will be more of the same. Also saying the biggest problem facing our country is immigration. The former president continuing to claim the economy is the worst than it has ever been before.
Can you imagine if Kamala won? You would go down to a 1929-style depression. I believe that, too. No, that'd crush your incomes and kill millions of jobs and wipe out your savings. We're not going to let that happen. You got to get out and vote. Just got to get out. When I win, you are 4 days away from the best jobs, the biggest paychecks, and the brightest economic future the world has ever seen.
Trump will hold rallies in North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan this weekend. After 10 visits to Wisconsin, the former president currently has no more scheduled stops to the state ahead of Election Day. Bill?